February 1971. The Sands Hotel parking garage in Las Vegas. 3:47 a.m. Sammy Davis Jr. was leaving after his third show of the night, exhausted but wired, the way performers always are after pouring everything onto a stage for 3 hours. His security guard, Big Mike, was walking him to his Rolls Royce when they both heard it. A sound that didn't belong in a parking garage at 4 in the morning. The sound of a child singing. Not performing, not practicing, singing the way people sing when they think nobody's listening. When they're singing for themselves, for comfort, for survival. The voice was young, maybe 10 or 11 years old, and it was coming from behind a concrete pillar near the back of the garage. "You hear that?" Sammy asked Mike. "Yeah, probably some kid sneaking around. I'll chase him off." "Don't," Sammy said quietly. "Just wait." They stood in the shadows and listened. The kid was singing "What a Wonderful World," Louis Armstrong's version, and he knew every word. His voice was untrained but pure, with a vibrato that came from somewhere real, somewhere hurt. Sammy recognized that quality. He'd had it himself once, a long time ago, before technique and professionalism had smoothed out the rough edges that come from singing through pain. Sammy walked toward the pillar, moving quietly. What he saw stopped him cold. A black boy, maybe 11 years old, sitting on a piece of cardboard with his back against the concrete. His clothes were filthy, multiple sizes too big, probably donated or stolen. His shoes had holes in them, his face was streaked with dirt, and his hair was matted. But his eyes were bright, alive, focused on something internal while he sang. Next to him on the cardboard was a backpack, equally dirty, and a shoebox. The shoebox was open, and inside it were perhaps a dozen items, carefully arranged. A photo of a woman, a small Bible, a harmonica, a pair of dice, a men's watch that had stopped working, and a medal of some kind, military maybe. The boy stopped singing the moment he saw Sammy. His whole body went rigid, ready to run. Kids living on the street developed that reflex, always ready to bolt. "Hey there," Sammy said, keeping his voice gentle. "Don't run. I'm not going to hurt you. I just heard you singing. You got a beautiful voice." The boy's eyes went wide. Not just because a stranger was talking to him, because he recognized who the stranger was. Even homeless kids in Las Vegas knew who Sammy Davis Jr. was. His face was on billboards all over town. "I wasn't doing nothing wrong," the boy said quickly. "I was just sitting here. I wasn't stealing or nothing. I'll leave." He started gathering his things, shoving items back into the shoebox with hands that were shaking from cold or fear or both. Sammy noticed his fingers. They were cracked and bleeding from the dry winter air. Nobody was taking care of this kid. Nobody was making sure he had lotion, warm gloves, or basic necessities. "What's your name?" Sammy asked, crouching down to the boy's level. The boy hesitated. Giving your real name to adults was dangerous when you were living on the street. Adults asked questions. They called authorities. They sent you back to wherever you'd run from, and usually there was a good reason you'd run. "Tommy," the boy finally said. Probably not his real name, but it was a start. "Tommy, I'm Sammy. You hungry, Tommy?" The boy's pride said no. His empty stomach overruled his pride. He nodded. "Come on," Sammy said. "Let's get you some food." "I don't got no money," Tommy said. "Did I ask you for money? I said let's get you some food. You coming or not?" 10 minutes later, Tommy was sitting in a booth at the Sands 24-hour coffee shop, staring at a menu like it was written in a foreign language. Sammy sat across from him, while Big Mike stood nearby, watching the interaction with an expression that suggested he'd seen Sammy do this kind of thing before. "Order whatever you want," Sammy said. Tommy ordered scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, hash browns, orange juice, and a chocolate shake. When the food came, he ate like someone who hadn't had a real meal in days. Probably because he hadn't. He tried to eat slowly, tried to maintain some dignity, but hunger won. He shoveled food into his mouth with both hands, barely stopping to breathe. Sammy didn't comment on this. He just sipped coffee and watched, letting the kid eat in peace. When Tommy finally slowed down, when his plate was empty and his stomach was full, Sammy spoke. "So, Tommy, how long you been living in that parking garage?" The boy's defenses went back up. "I'm not living there. I was just resting." "Kid, I've been performing in Vegas for 20 years. I know the difference between resting and surviving." Tommy stared at his empty plate. 3 weeks, maybe 4. I lost track. "Where were you before that?" "Foster home, in Henderson." "Why'd you leave?" Tommy's jaw tightened. The dad, he had hands that wandered places they shouldn't. "I told the social worker. She didn't believe me, said I was making trouble, so I left." Sammy felt something cold settle in his chest. He'd heard this story before, too many times. Kids slipping through cracks in a system that was supposed to protect them. Kids choosing the street over abuse, because at least on the street, you knew what you were dealing with. "What about your real parents?" Sammy asked gently. "Mom died when I was 8. Cancer. Dad was in Vietnam. He came back different. Angry all the time. Started drinking. One night he went out for cigarettes and never came back. That was 2 years ago." Tommy said all this flatly, like he was reading a grocery list. The emotion had been wrung out of these facts through repetition. He'd told this story to social workers, to cops, to well-meaning strangers. None of them had changed his situation. "The stuff in that shoebox," Sammy said. "Those were your dad's things?" Tommy nodded. "That's all I got left of him, and of my mom. The photo and the Bible were hers. The watch and the medal were his. He got that medal in Da Nang, Bronze Star. He was a hero before he was a drunk." Sammy understood something in that moment. This kid wasn't just homeless. He was carrying grief that had nowhere to go. He was 11 years old, and he'd lost his mother to cancer, his father to war and alcohol, and his childhood to a system that had failed him. And still, at 4 in the morning, in a parking garage, he was singing about what a wonderful world it was. "You got anywhere to go, Tommy? Family? Friends?" "No, sir." "If I called social services right now, where would they send you?" "Back to Henderson, probably. Back to that house." Tommy's voice cracked. "I know you probably have to. But please, I'd rather live in the garage." Sammy made a decision. He made it fast, without thinking it through, without consulting his lawyers or his accountants or anyone who would have told him all the reasons this was a terrible idea. He made it because a kid who'd lost everything was sitting across from him, still singing, still surviving, still carrying his dead parents' belongings in a shoebox like they were sacred relics. "What if there was another option?" Sammy said. Tommy looked up, hope and suspicion fighting for control of his face. "What if you came to stay with me, just for a while, until we figure something else out? A real place, not a foster home, not the street, somewhere safe." Tommy stared at him like Sammy had started speaking in tongues. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me. I know you've been dealt a bad hand and you're still in the game. I know you sing Louis Armstrong in parking garages. I know you keep your parents' things in a shoebox, and you protect them like their treasure. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are." "People don't just do stuff like this," Tommy said, his voice thick with tears he was fighting to hold back. "There's always a catch. What do you want?" Sammy leaned forward. "I want you to have a chance. That's it. That's the whole deal. You come stay at my place, you get fed, you get clean clothes, you get to sleep in a real bed, and you get to be a kid for a minute instead of a survivor. No catch, no strings, just a chance." Tommy broke. The tears he'd been holding back came flooding out. Not quiet tears, loud body-shaking sobs that made other people in the coffee shop turn and stare. Sammy got up, walked around the booth, and sat next to Tommy, He put his arm around the boy's shoulders and let him cry. "It's okay," Sammy said quietly. "Let it out. You've been holding it together for too long. You don't have to do that anymore." Big Mike watched this scene with wet eyes. Later, he'd tell other members of Sammy's security team that it was the most human thing he'd ever seen. A legend at the peak of his career, taking in a street kid at 4 in the morning because the kid could sing and had kind eyes and deserved better than what life had given him. The legal process that followed was complicated. Sammy couldn't just take a kid home like he was adopting a puppy. There were lawyers, social workers, background checks, home visits, and mountains of paperwork. But Sammy Davis Jr. had money and fame and lawyers who knew how to navigate systems. Within 6 weeks, he'd been approved as a temporary guardian for Tommy Wilson. That was the boy's real name, Tommy Wilson. 11 years old, orphaned, lost, found. Tommy moved into Sammy's house in Beverly Hills. He got his own room, his own bathroom, his own closet full of new clothes that actually fit. He got 3 meals a day, cooked by Sammy's personal chef. He got enrolled in a private school. He got music lessons from some of the best teachers in Los Angeles. But more than any of that, he got stability. He got routine. He got someone who asked him how his day was and actually listened to the answer. He got someone who showed up to his school plays and music recitals. He got someone who taught him that adults could be trusted, that home could be safe, that the world wasn't just a series of people who'd hurt you or leave you. It wasn't always easy. Tommy had trauma. He had nightmares. He had panic attacks when Sammy came home late from a show, convinced that this too-good-to-be-true situation was about to evaporate. He hoarded food in his room for the first 3 months, unable to believe that meals would keep coming. He tested boundaries constantly, waiting for Sammy to get tired of him and send him away. But Sammy didn't send him away. When Tommy stole money from Sammy's wallet to see what would happen, Sammy sat him down and explained that if he needed something, he should ask, not steal. When Tommy failed a math test and tried to hide it, Sammy hired a tutor. When Tommy got in a fight at school defending another kid who was being bullied, Sammy took him out for ice cream and told him that standing up for people who couldn't defend themselves was one of the most important things a person could do. Slowly, over months and then years, Tommy started to believe this was real, that he wasn't going to wake up back in that parking garage, that he'd found something rare and precious, someone who chose to love him not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Sammy never legally adopted Tommy. The guardianship remained temporary on paper, giving Tommy the option to make his own choices when he turned 18. But in every way that mattered, Sammy became the father Tommy had lost. And Tommy became the son Sammy had never had. Tommy Wilson graduated from high school in 1977. He'd gone from a kid who couldn't read without stumbling over words to an honor student. He gave a speech at graduation about second chances and the people who give them. He thanked his teachers, his friends, and the man who found me in a parking garage and showed me what family could look like. Sammy was in the audience, crying openly. After the ceremony, Tommy gave him a gift. It was the shoebox, the same one from that night in 1971. Inside were still his mother's photo and Bible, his father's watch and medal and dice. But there was something new. A photo of Sammy and Tommy together, taken on Tommy's first day in his new home. Tommy had written on the back, "The day my life started." Tommy went to college, studied music education, became a teacher in South Central Los Angeles, working with kids who reminded him of who he'd been. Kids from broken homes. Kids who'd been told they were throwaways, that they didn't matter, that nobody would come looking for them. Tommy came looking for them. He found them in the same way Sammy had found him, by paying attention to the kids everyone else overlooked, by listening to the ones who sang in empty spaces, by seeing potential where others saw problems. Over 30 years of teaching, Tommy Wilson helped hundreds of kids find their voices. Some became professional musicians. Some became teachers like him. Some just became adults who remembered that once, when they were certain nobody cared, somebody proved them wrong. And every single one of those kids heard the story of the parking garage, of Sammy Davis Jr. walking toward a pillar at 4 in the morning because he heard a child singing, of how that one choice, that one moment of paying attention, had rippled outward in ways nobody could have predicted. When Sammy died in 1990, Tommy was devastated. He told the story of their meeting to a crowd of celebrities and dignitaries who'd known Sammy the performer, but maybe hadn't known Sammy the man who took in street kids. "Sammy Davis Jr. saved my life," Tommy said, his voice breaking. "But more than that, he taught me that saving lives is something any of us can do. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to be rich. You just have to pay attention. You have to be willing to stop when you hear someone singing in the dark, because you never know when that person is going to change your life as much as you change theirs." In 2020, at age 60, Tommy Wilson retired from teaching. At his retirement party, his former students presented him with a gift. They tracked down the security footage from that night in 1971. The Sands Hotel was long gone, but someone had archived the tapes. The footage was grainy, black and white, barely visible, but there it was, a small figure sitting behind a pillar, singing. And then Sammy Davis Jr., walking toward him, stopping, listening, the beginning of everything. Tommy watched the footage and cried the same tears he'd cried 49 years earlier in that coffee shop. Grateful tears, disbelieving tears, the tears of someone who'd been found when they were certain they were lost forever. Today, Tommy Wilson runs a nonprofit in Los Angeles. It's called the Parking Garage Project. They find homeless youth, get them off the streets, connect them with resources, education, and most importantly, with adults who give a damn. Adults who'll stop when they hear a kid singing. Adults who understand that sometimes the most important thing you can do is pay attention to the people everyone else walks past. On Tommy's desk is that shoebox. Inside it are 3 photos now: his mother, his father, and Sammy. The 3 people who made him who he is. One gave him life, one gave him pride, one gave him a future. If this story of one moment of attention changing everything moved you, like and subscribe for more stories about the legends who understood that greatness isn't just about what you accomplish. It's about who you help along the way. Share this with someone who needs to remember that one person paying attention can change a life. Have you ever been that person for someone? Or has someone been that person for you? Tell us in the comments. Hit that notification bell, because these stories remind us that we all have the power to save someone by simply stopping to listen when they're singing in the dark.